Anytime you give power to words, you give power to creation. Now, when you have a moment of inspiration, of clarity, you have the ability from that vantage point to declare what you should be doing. If you see your life as a way where you can make decisions, where you can change your future, where you can obligate yourself to do what you think is right from a moment of speech, you now can change your life. Hi everybody and welcome to the show. I'm Charlie Harary and I am so excited that you've tuned in today for today's show. Today we're going to talk about a topic that we all want. You know, at the surface, we seem different, we look different, we talk different and act different. But inside we're all the same. And we're the same in that we want the same thing, a great life. We want to do the things and take the steps that will enable us to look back at our lives and know we've achieved greatness. And the question is how? How do we become great? Now there are so many ways, but today we're going to talk about one of the most powerful ways to achieve greatness, and that's to create it. As Peter Drucker, the great management and leadership guru, once stated, the best way to predict your future is to create it. It's not enough to just want it. You have to know how to actually build it. You don't have to just accept the course of your life today. You have the power and ability to determine your destiny and choose the life you want. But how do we create our future? By accessing one of our most powerful resources, our speech. Each of us have this thing in common, but there's more stuff that we have in common. And one in particular is that we were created in a very unique way. Now, the Bible states that we were created in the image of God. Now, what does that mean, to be created in the image of the divine? So there's a very famous spiritual concept that drives to the core of this powerful idea. I'll say it in Hebrew, and then I'll translate. Mahu af ata. If him, then you. If God, then man. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? Well, it means that God tells us, I've created you in my image so that if you see me do something, that means you have the power to do it as well. Why? Because it's in your DNA, so to speak. It's in your genes. So if I'm kind, then so should you. And if I'm patient, then so should you. But it also means that if I have a power, in some way, so do you. If you look at the Bible, where is God's power of creation? Now, creation is what we're talking about, right? We want to create our future. We want to create a great life. So how did God create the universe? Well, if you look at Genesis, it says, God said, let there be light. God said, let there be. God keeps on saying stuff, and things keep on happening. The verb the Bible should have used was God made or God formed, but it doesn't do that. Why? Because it's teaching us a valuable lesson. In fact, it's cluing us into a power that he used. So it's a power that we have, the power of creation. You see, we live in a physical world, so we assume that creation takes place when we act or do or form or make. But that's not when creation happens. That's when execution happens. Creation happens at an earlier point, when we say. Speech is what you use to create reality. Action is what you use to execute on that creation. In fact, the gift that God gave man is articulate speech. This is what distinguishes us from animals. No other creature has the ability to communicate in an articulate, creative, and sensitive manner. Man's words are invested with almost cosmic power to shape the universe, just as God originally brought the universe into existence with speech. Our words even have the ability to change reality. Our words have the ability to create and destroy our lives and those around us. Okay, now if you're watching, you're asking yourself, okay, that sounds great, but and maybe it works for God, but I don't think it's working for me too well. I mean, I don't know if you know my life, but last I checked, the speech isn't doing it. Why? It's because we've taken this resource that has been given to us and debased it of its power. We've misused it and abused it. So now, it's all but lost its effectiveness. Let me tell you a story. For many years, I practiced law. And the law that I practiced was real estate law. So I have been involved in buying and selling a whole lot of buildings. But there was one deal that I'll never forget. We got a call from an older man who had a building he wanted to sell. He's been involved in real estate for years, and he had a nice little building in a part of town that just took a downturn. He was having trouble renting out the space, and he just wanted out. He said he was talking with some people, and he may have a buyer, and he wanted us to represent him to complete the sale. Great. Guess what happened? 2 days after our meeting, one of the largest retailers in the country announced it was building a superstore on the same block. That man's value of his building tripled overnight. When I saw this, I went crazy. I ran to my office and called him up. And I said, "Did you hear the news?" He said, "Yeah, I just heard it. That's amazing." I said, "It is amazing. We checked. We think you can get much more for your building." He said, "Oh yeah, it's too late." He said, "I already sold the building." I said, "Sold the building?" I'm like, "You hired us to be your lawyers. We didn't draft anything yet." He said, "Yeah, I know, but yesterday I had a conversation with somebody and he agreed to buy the building for me." I'm like, "Did you sign anything? Did you write anything?" He said, "No, we just had a cup of coffee." I said, "Whew. I mean, there's nothing in writing. So therefore, we can get at least 2 to 3 times what you got for the building." He paused, and I'll never forget the silence on the phone. And he said, "Not obligated to sell him the building? I told him I would sell him the building. I don't got to put that in writing. My word is my bond." Now, that one moment taught me one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned. Put it in writing. My word is my bond. And I hung up that phone that day. It changed, man. I had never in my life ever experienced somebody who took their word that seriously. Now, I'm a lawyer, and when I went to law school, I learned and I was taught and taught. It's got to be in writing, it's got to be signed. That's the law. But to this man, his word was the law. His word was his bond. And when he spoke, he created things. The sale of that building took place once he spoke. He didn't need contracts or deeds or keys. That's all execution. Creation is when he said it. That's how words create. Why isn't our speech creating our future? Because our words aren't our bonds. We just say stuff. We don't even mean it. Am I right? I mean, how many times have you told somebody, "I'll call you later"? Will you? We're not even sure when we say it. "I'll have it done by tonight," which means please get off my back and I'll get it done when I get it done. I hope somewhere around tonight. Or better, "I'll meet you at 9," which means somewhere in the area of 9 o'clock. When we speak, we don't even mean it. When we make a promise, it's not really a promise. We say things without realizing that we're creating an obligation, a new reality. And the more we just say stuff without thinking and without realizing and without putting any power to our words, the more we take our most powerful resource and suck away its creative power. If we really believed that our word was our bond, We can create our future today. You know who gets this? Kids. When you're with your kids in public and you need them to stop doing something, stop fighting or get in the car or get out of the car or get in the store, what do? We promise them stuff. Honey, if you're good, we're going for ice cream tomorrow. And your kid's like, if I get in the car, I get to go for ice cream? He's like, good deal. He's like, all right, let's go to the car. Next day, he tells you, Daddy, when are we going for ice cream? And you're like, ice cream? We forgot we even made the promise 5 seconds after the promise. Like, oh yeah, oh sorry honey, but it's not going to work today. Maybe another time. Remember that moment? When your child looks you in the eyes and says, but you promised. Now until that moment, the child assumes that when someone says something, it's going to happen, right? Or else why would you say it? And if you use that P word, promise, then for sure it's going to happen. Because to a child, your word is your bond. And at that moment, he realizes that maybe it's not. Then, this is what happens. He's in the living room playing ball. Now, Mom told him not to play ball in the living room, but there's no other space in the house that has enough room that he can practice fielding ground balls against the wall. So he throws the ball against the wall and it ricochets off his glove and it hits a picture frame. And he watches in slow motion as that picture frame starts to shake and then falls and then crash, and then he can hear the footsteps. Oh, you hear those footsteps. So he quickly puts his glove under the couch, and Mom walks in and goes, what happened? And he remembers, wait a second, words don't have to be true. Oh, I was walking by, Mom, and I tripped and I bumped into the picture and it fell. And she goes, really, are you okay? And he says, yeah. I mean, I'm a little shaken up, but I'm okay. And Mom walks out and he thinks, oh yeah, I like to say whatever you want thing. And then he ends up in school. Oh, I didn't do my homework because I was sick. And teacher goes, do it tomorrow. And he's like, this is working out great. And then he walks into his friends and goes, yeah, you look great in that. I love that music. And they're like, all right, cool, hang with us. And all of a sudden he realizes, I could say what I want. There's nothing to these words except for words. And that power, that bond, that creative juice that God put into words starts to reduce and reduce and reduce. You want to hear even worse? We do this to ourselves. We make promises to ourselves that we even know we're not going to keep when we say it, right? Ever been in a meal and know you shouldn't be eating as much as you're eating? What do? Tomorrow I'm going on a diet. Even as we say it, we don't mean it. We're just using it to feel less guilty about doing the things that we do. If we took our words that seriously, then our words would have the power to create our future. Now, there are still some words that have this power, right? I mean, if a guy looks at his girlfriend and says, will you marry me? And she says yes. They've created some bond, right? It's just words. But after saying that, all of a sudden people are drinking champagne, shopping for dresses, buying suits, ordering flowers, booking halls, right? Can you imagine if that guy wakes up a few months later and is like, what's all the commotion? And she's like, well, it's our wedding day. And he's like, wedding? You took that seriously? No, I was just saying. It was just words. I didn't mean it. Can you imagine what happens next? Yeah, he goes from having a wedding to having a funeral in a day. Why? Because there's some words that still have creative power. Isn't that what happens at a wedding? You exchange words, but the words that you exchange have real power. They change things. They bind your soul together. What's a contract? It's just words. Okay, it's written down and there's a squiggly signature underneath. But that's all it is. It's words. And contracts change realities. Anytime you give power to words, you give power to creation. You know, in Hebrew, the word for word is dibur. And the word for thing is davar, because it's the exact same letters. Because speech and things are one. When you speak, you create things. How many times in your life have you said to yourself, I'm going to do it, but you don't? How many times in life have you said to yourself, I'm going to hit a goal, and even when you said it, you know you're not going to do it? And every time that happens, you lose your power. Your actions should follow your speech. And if you believed in the power of speech, you can use it to begin to create the life you deep down want. How many times in life have you said to yourself, I'm going to do it, but you don't? How many times in life have you set a goal, and then even when you set the goal, you know you're not going to really do it, and every time that happens, you lose creative power. Our actions should follow our speech. And if you believed in the power of speech, you can use it to begin to create a life that you deep down want and know that you should have. But it goes even further. We can use the power of speech to not only change our lives, but to create relationships with those around us. Now, what do I mean? Let's go into this. We all know that having a great life requires great relationships, right? I mean, you can have everything in the world, but if there's nobody around you, what good is it? The life that we're looking for necessitates other people. It has great, loving, giving relationships that surround us, loved ones, that hold our hand through the ups and downs of life. And what's the glue to any relationship? What's the connector? Speech, right? Isn't it? It's just communication. Communication is the key to any relationship. And if we understood the power of speech, we can use it to strengthen the relationships that we have with those around us. Let me tell you a story. My mom is a psychologist. She once told me a story that blew my mind. She had been working with a couple and they were about to get divorced. One day she was meeting with the wife and the wife sits back and says, I love my husband. And my mom says, really? She goes, yeah. I mean, he's not my father, but I didn't marry my father. I married my husband. And I love my husband for who he is. Now, her father was a very successful businessman, and her husband was going through some really hard economic times. She said, I don't need my husband to be my dad. I need him to be my husband. And my mom looked at her and said, this is amazing. I mean, I've been working with you guys for so long, and this is your husband's issue. He thinks you don't love him because he can't live up to your father. Go home tonight and tell him what you told me. It's going to change your marriage. Now, my mom's patient turned to her and said, I can't tell it to my husband. She's like, why not? And she said, well, because he's my husband. It's weird. I can tell it to you. You're my therapist, but I can't tell it to him. And my mom left the office heartbroken. I mean, she had just reached a breakthrough. And she could save the marriage if the wife would just have the guts to share her feelings with her spouse. And if she doesn't, he may never know. Why don't we have better relationships? What's the block? Isn't it just words? Each of us know that there are people in our lives that with just a few words, we can change our relationship with them. Am I wrong? Can you think of one person right now in your life that you know with one phone call, you can fix things, you can create a deeper bond, you can make amends? One, I love you, Mom. Thanks for everything. One, I appreciate you, how hard you work. My father, my wife, my employee. One, I'm sorry I hurt you. I never really meant to hurt you. Am I wrong? Speech. One conversation can change your relationship forever. Why don't we do it for? You see, because each of us have this thing called a comfort zone, and we can't seem to break out of it. There's a thing that we have, and we're so worried about feeling weird and feeling like we're on fire. Ever get that feeling, by the way, where you're about to say something, and it's like you feel like your whole body's on fire? You're like, no, I can't. I can't. So we take that speech that has the ability to change relationships and we hide it inside. And we hope and we pray that they'll just figure it out. Or we come up with excuses, this is a good one, and say, well, maybe they should apologize. They don't have my number. Or better, we just expect them to understand us, right? And then we get upset when they don't know what's in our heads. Relationships are built on one thing: authentic, real, deep communication. When you tell someone what you're really feeling, when you allow them in to understand you, and when you take the time to understand them, that's the glue. That's what makes the relationship happen. But it takes guts. And it takes an appreciation of the fact that we have power, divine power. We're sitting on a nuclear power plant called our words, and we're scared to death to distribute it to people. It's there for us, and it's waiting for us to use it, and it'll give us the life we want. Let me tell you a story. One time I was giving a seminar in New Jersey. We were talking about the power of speech, and I asked everyone in the room to do what I call the Twin Towers exercise. On September 11, 2001, the Twin Towers were struck by two hijacked airplanes. Now, I know someone that died in the towers that day. He was in the building when the plane crashed many floors beneath him. Can you imagine? People were sitting in their offices, and they knew that they were never getting out. They were minutes from death. What do you think he did? He picked up the phone and called his wife. I know the family, and she told me. He told her how much he loved her and how lucky he was that she married him. He said things to her that he had never said to her in all their years of marriage. I mean, it is just so heart-wrenching to think of that scene, the pain of this man and his wife. What struck me about this story was, what do you think would have happened had he said those things to his wife without a plane crash? Can you imagine how much deeper their relationship would have been beforehand? Now, I asked the audience to picture as if they were in the Twin Towers and had to make one last phone call. Who would they make it to? What would they say? Who would you make it to? You had one phone call. Who would you call? What would you say? So everyone in the room wrote it out and had to share it with the group. I'll never forget this. One guy raised his hand. He wanted to share. He was a college student. He said, "I'd call my dad." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, my father's an immigrant, and he was really hard on me growing up. We fought a lot. But now that I'm in college, I realized that he wasn't against me. He was for me. He was building me. He was teaching me how to be strong, how to fight for what I believed in. He was pushing me because he loved me. I would tell my dad," he said, "that even though I gave him a hard time growing up, I knew he loved me, and I loved him." This is like the perfect moment. I said, "Go call your dad." And he says, "Nah, I can't." Now the whole crowd is like, "What?" And they're cheering and they're cheering. They're like, "Call your dad." And he says, "I can't. I just can't." I said, "Why not?" I'm like, "You got to break out of your comfort zone. You can do it." He said, "I can't." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because my dad died 2 years ago. I've been telling this to his grave every week. I just can't tell it to him." And I got to tell you, there were a few dry eyes in that room. And I will never forget that moment my whole life. Here's a man who understood the power of speech a little bit too late. How many people in your life would your life be different with if you just realized that one conversation could change your relationship? "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow." Yeah, do it today. A great life is more in your control than you think. You've been given a divine power of speech, and you can use it to create new worlds, to change your reality, to have the life you're dreaming of, to have the relationships you deep down know you want, to build bridges where bridges have never been built. Use it. Take the power back and use it to be great. Your words are far more powerful than you may have realized. Being created in God's image gives you access to the same creative power that He has, the power of speech. It's a gift that you can begin creating the life you always wanted, a life that you deserve. You can use your words to build bridges and to bring healing into your relationships. I want to encourage you to use your speech carefully and strategically to create the future you've always dreamed of. If you see your speech as just useless words, then that's what it's going to be. But if you see your speech as your bond, you'll speak and things will move. Don't take my word for it. Try it. Next time you make a commitment, mean it. Hold on to it. Watch yourself suddenly find the power. You may have to push yourself a little. You may lose a little bit more sleep or work a drop harder, but your body and the world will come to serve that in which you say. We're just about out of time. I wish we had more because there's so much more to discuss. This is just the tip of the iceberg.